Shifted this evening. If I asked Joe Burgers of a certain vintage, if I said to you, what's the name of that nursery? You know, the one on Jan Smuts Avenue. You go down the hill, Rosebank, and you go down the hill, and it's on the right-hand side, Parktown North, Jan Smuts Avenue. What's it called? And Tara Penny, you would say, it's Keith Kirsten.
It's Keith Kirsten!
But it's not been Keith Kirsten for like 12 years. Okay, listen, we take one plant-related inquiry, okay? Only one. We'll plant the question. You're allowed, Tara Penny, because you scare me, to ask Keith Kirsten, who is one of your heroes. You've got all of his books.
Well, most of them. I mean, I feel like I grew up with you in the house. Your books were always on the tables. And in the thriving metropolis of Polokwane, growing up there,
known as Petersburg in those days.
Yes. My father's big passion was trying to grow a fuchsia. And every year we would buy the seeds or we would buy the fully formed plants from the nursery, and we'd come home and we'd figure out the soil content and everything.
And then you'd kill them.
And every funeral would be held for every fuchsia. And I remember as a little girl saying something to my dad along the lines of, Dad, if I ever get to meet Uncle Keith, I promise I'll ask him, how can we
you've done it now.
Keep one fuchsia alive? So any advice for John Meany and Polokwane would be very much appreciated.
Well, Tara, we did talk in the passage, but I have to tell you that fuchsias have never been one of my first loves, because it's it's a lady's flower and it's lovely. but they are delicate, but they grow very beautifully, and most people put them in too much shade and they drop their leaves and they drop their flowers and they really get a bit of wet feet. So they really want an east or a southeast facing position where they get, say, a little bit of morning sun and afternoon shade, or just very good filtered sun all day. But filtered, so it's in the shade, but it does get good light. You'll only get flowers out of an azalea or out of fuchsias or any of those kind of shade-loving flowering plants if they get reasonably good light, and that's what they need. And they need to be well drained, not have any clay soils that are too wet. They must be well drained. But you get trial and error; it'll get there, and they must be pruned. Fuchsias need to be pruned from time to time.
Thank you very much.
Now, listen, I want a report back, please. 6 months' time.
Yes,
I'll bring you some
exactly.
photos.
And read up in the books, because it tells you about it in the future.
She's got the book.
And you can't plant a yellowwood, a podocarpus in your garden in the Cape, because your garden's too small for it. But you could plant something more tall and narrow,
right?
And something that can take that wind.
Yes, the wind. Now, listen, where have you been?
Where have I been?
You sold the Keith Kirsten business, 5 nurseries.
It was a management buyout. Yes.
Yeah, 2001?
About then,
yeah.
10, 12 years ago.
And then you went very quiet.
No, I've just been very busy. I produced 3 books since then, and I've been travelling to the Cape a lot, because I do a lot of work down there in the large-scale project management and designing
for the wine
designing
farmers,
gardeners for stud farms and wine farms and all sorts of things, and some big estates for private people, for both local and overseas. It's been great fun. I never knew I'd get a call from people like Sol Kersner, and and in his good ripe age and wanted help. And everyone used to tell me that he was almost so difficult to deal with, and he's really been the most really nice guy to deal with.
He's got a reputation of being such a taskmaster in the development of Sun City.
Oh, he wants the answers, and he wants it all there, and it must be on time. But he's good. He's good. He pays a lot of attention to detail, which I'm a bit like that.
But that's the ideal client. You can want a client who knows what they want,
Absolutely.
and then you can deliver what they want, and then everyone's happy.
And knows that things do cost money.
Yes, and gardening is expensive, especially on a large scale like that. I mean, plants are pricey things.
It doesn't have to be. If you've got good gardeners and you're a gardener yourself and you do it the right way and you don't expect everything to grow overnight, then it's fine. And if you garden according to certain sustainable, methods, you'll be amazed what you can achieve.
Now, you studied horticulture in the 70s.
In Durban, yes.
In Durban. You worked for the city of Durban in those days while you were training. But very soon, you actually, in Pretoria, opened up your first Keith Kirsten nursery with a couple of mates.
At a place called Waterkloof.
Yes.
And it was in 1978, believe it or not. And it's interesting that area we're now doing, this new sustainable garden centre, is actually in Waterfall.
Yes, you like the water.
Yeah, and exactly, I don't know how many years later, but almost to the day, because we opened on the 28th of August.
28th of August 1978 you opened. You're also now opening your sustainable garden. We'll get there, garden centre. We'll get there.
I'm very nervous about being on a money-making program. I mean, money does grow on trees, but... Yeah.
You've made lots of money, so let's talk about how you've done it.
I live okay.
You live comfortably. Now, you borrowed the first money, though. It was, 17,000 Rand between three of you?
Well, no, it was 17 each.
Oh, 17 each. Big
and
investment.
that paid for the building, believe it or not, in those days. It paid for the building, but we did that in 1 month. It was amazing.
So,
those days.
Why did your name go above the door? You're renowned as a person who's been very good at branding yourself and your businesses and growing your brand. Why did you get your name on the door if there were three of you and you all borrowed 17,000?
Yeah, the sub-editor of the Pretoria News at the time, who I used to write a gardening column for, and I was so amateurish at it at the time, and Greenhorn, he used to edit it for me, or not edit it, but tell me where I went wrong. And the first book he bought me was a Reader's Digest, Read and Write Better. So. Anyway, so I learned from that, and I had an old Olympic typewriter, and I used to type them out, and I used to always be right at deadline, and it was a nerve-breaking thing. But I wrote a gardening column for the Pretoria News for quite a number of the sub-editor actually became one of my partners in the business, with a guy who had a bit of money, and so we both borrowed the money from a guy who had the money, and we each had a third. And later on in the system, I bought them out. But anyway,
but your name
then I came to Johannesburg, and I had a sleeping partner here as well.
But your name went above the door because you had the presence in the Pretoria market.
A little bit of that, and then Jonathan Ball actually produced my very first book on container and indoor gardening, which one of these days I hope to reprint, but with a much more glamorous look about it. But it was wonderful, and that book also. Kind of set us on the map, and that was with books, and Strake had faith in me in those days, and they've still published most of my books.
At peak Keith Kirsten, you were 5 outlets.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah, but I mean, you had an extraordinary impact and influence on gardening in South Africa throughout the 1980s into the 90s.
I wrote to the SABC through a friend of mine who, in fact, I still see and is, in fact, coming to the opening tomorrow night, Barry Grabenstein. He used to work for the SABC as a producer, and he used to produce some of those very glamorous magazine sing and song programs. There was one called Sing, I think, and there was all those wonderful dancers and singers and all that, Deshamoy and all those people. I can't remember them all. But he was a friend of mine, and through families from the Eastern Cape, and I said to him, this gardening should be on TV. It's ridiculous. And he said, well, write to Robin Knox Grant, and he's the head of magazines, and tell him that television should be on TV. And I was still literally out of college. And I wrote, and they said, well, there's a magazine. They came back to me, and they said, there's a magazine program going on with Donna Wurzel and Christopher Bennett.
Donna Wurzel and Christopher Bennett. He had a ginger beard and a bald head.
Absolutely.
Yes,
and he also had a program on Radio Today or something. Anyway, and so I got onto television through that, and they said, bring your plants. And they said, what could you do? And I said, well, I'll do a terrarium, and I'll do a little thing on African violets, and I'll pot a bonsai, and I'll plant up a lovely indoor container, which I went and did on one of those. And it was called, the first program was called Town and Around. Then there was Sunbeams and Cucumbers with Dawn and Des Lindbergh. and we went on, and Stefan Weltz, who sadly we lost recently. Yes. And so that's how it started on television. I was on television for 25, actually 30 years, non-stop.
Extraordinary.
And every week, even through all the dilemma of 1994, they never took off sport, obviously, and they never took off gardening, and they never took off one other program. Oh, the guys that did the gym in the morning told you to jump up and down when everyone was getting the early days of gym on television.
Oh.
Getting fit at 6 and 30 in the morning.
There were some highlights, that was gardening, and then there was gym on TV in the morning. Nobody has to...
Exactly. They never canned us. Oh, and I think Nooit for Nooit never got canned.
Nooit for Nooit.
It's still going.
No, Nooit for Nooit. We've had Mr. Nooit for Nooit in studio.
Have you really?
And he's created, again, a fantastic business out of entertainment. My guest this evening is Keith Kirsten. He is the man behind the brand of Keith Kirsten, of course. It is all about him. That's a little bit of the history. In the last couple of years, he's been involved in Keith Kirsten Horticulture International. He's done lots of consulting around the world, but particularly for big-moneyed individuals. He's name-dropped Sol Kersner. And he's now reopening a garden centre. For the first time since 2001, when there was a management buyout of the Keith Kirsten business, he's now launching a brand new concept. And gardening, let's face it, over the last 10, 20, 30 years has fundamentally changed. I'm looking forward to finding out what the new concept is all about in just a moment.
John Mather Shifters.
Gardening has changed fundamentally over the last 20 years, and Keith Kirsten is launching a brand new sustainable gardening concept. It's the first of a new series of Keith Kirsten businesses, is it, Keith?
Yep. Well, I just think over the years gardening has evolved and things have changed, both in the way we look at indigenous plants and all the lovely things that we have in this country that are sent all over the world and made beautiful everywhere else in the world. And it's not it's my brand, but it's a franchise. So it's going to be a first franchise for me. I mean, I've done my 35 years of retailing, and it's a great idea, and it's still wonderful, and I'll lecture and train staff and do all those kind of things. But the Goodwin family, headed up by Ryan and Kerry Goodwin, are going to really man and run this whole place.
Now, they used to be involved, the Goodwins, in...
They're growers. They've got big growers.
They had the nursery in Craighall Park.
That's right. They still have a little one there.
Yes,
and they're a good family business. They're well respected in the industry. They've been around for a long time. They grow well, plants. They grow plants well. Ryan and Kerry are next generation, and they're rolling up their sleeves and getting involved in it, and it's going to be great. It's all about the same concepts that Keith Kirsten. It's done a full brand manual and a full franchise, document. It's been done by the same lady who did Nando's and Ocean Basket, and she's done a great job. And it'll all be about the service, the style, understanding your market, and having the range. And really telling people how to garden, showing them.
I think one of the greatest strengths of the Keith Kirsten name and brand has been the fact that you're more of a teacher than you are a gardener or horticulturist. I mean, that's been the power of it. Through television, through the books, and through the service.
I did, and I still do, many lectures for some garden clubs all around the country. I was in Port Alfred just the other day. And it's the Eastern Cape, and my family came from Queenstown, so I felt a bit,
nostalgic.
Nostalgic. And I went to visit my mother's sister still in East London, all that kind of thing. And but it's all about that, and that's the point. Helping young people, particularly now, with their new homes and gardens, and Waterfall, which is huge, 25,000 houses when they're done with it all. Is a captive market, and they all need gardens and trees. And the Meir family, Yaya and Ibrahim, cousins, the Meirs, actually asked me to come there because they wanted me to put back trees in an area that was always very beautiful and felt and lovely plants and trees along the Yukske River. And so it's about marketing trees, and trees have gone a bit out of fashion, because most people who are living in established gardens don't need another tree.
No.
But people in new gardens need trees, and they need beautiful established trees.
And we're seeing the expansion of urban areas, and we're seeing the high-rise concepts. Lots of people are sort of living in townhouses and things, and are not necessarily realizing the, psychological benefit, if you like, of having a bit of green, and what can be done in compact spaces. Because very few people have got 1 acre gardens anymore.
Exactly. But they've got a reasonable enough space to have at least 3 or 4 or 5 trees around their house, because they're the outdoor air conditioners. You start with them. And then the philosophy at Waterfall is to be indigenous.
Yeah.
So it's about sustainable gardening, water-wise plants, more indigenous plants.
What trees are indigenous to Midrand? I mean, it's felt.
Well, your South African stinkwood, Celsus africana, all the rest species, now called Circe, because the botanists keep changing their names, but all the Korea's trees are indigenous. Yeah. The wild olive trees are indigenous. Dies catonifolia, the pom-pom tree. There's many. Calpurnia with its lovely fern-like foliage. It gets beautiful yellow cassia-like flowers. There's many. And if you go to Waterfall, the place is called Keith Kirsten, but it's at Waterfall Wilds on the corner, right opposite the Virgin. And it will help you there.
Yeah,
and we've got them.
And it's just the concept is, again, about making gardening easy, because people have less and less time. People have always had a little bit of time, but there's less and less time, apparently. And it's a very different discipline. How is the climate affecting your thinking around gardening? Is that the drive towards indigenous?
Yes, that is part of it, but also most parts of Joburg are very, very cold in the winter. And people still want to plant bougainvilleas and palms and hibiscus and that. And you still can in protected gardens. Actually, the Santon area is very built up and protected, and many parts of the central part of Joburg. But you get down on the Yuxgay River, or you're down in the Eastgate side, and you go to Centurion, it's as cold as Charity in the winter. So you need to plant cold climate plants, and then more indigenous plants that can take the cold. And there's a wide range of them: bulbous plants, ground covers, shrubs, and all that kind of thing. It's about organic gardening.
Yeah.
Organic gardening and recycling. We don't have one chemical fertilizer. We sell only organic fertilizers.
Are you going to make
pesticides.
gardening trendy again? Because gardening was very trendy in your heyday of television. You made it trendy. You made it fashionable. It's kind of fallen off the radar a little bit in terms of a pastime or a lifestyle, maybe.
I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that our grannies and our parents taught us, and we lived most probably in bigger gardens. It's a lifestyle way of living these days in smaller living units. Security comes along into it as well. But the point is that people still need, and then the younger generation, especially if they work, both husband and wife are working or partners are working, they don't have the time. No. And not everyone can afford a gardener full time. But people, once they've planted and the bug's bitten, I promise you, they become gardeners.
If the bug's bitten, then you're not getting the right advice.
Well, if you spray too much pesticides, you're going to not have the right bugs to kill the bad bugs. So you need to get a re-look at the way you garden.
Is this going to be big?
And vegetables and herbs.
Is the new Keith Kirsten's going to be big? I mean, you say it's a franchise. Are we going to see 10, 20, 30, 50 of them across the country?
Oh, I don't know. Let's start with one and see where we go. I'm not at my age, even though I don't think I'm that old. I'm not about to try and reinvent the wheel and go big. I mean, I've also learned that the small is beautiful and one at a time. But we've got 1.5 acres there. We've got 650 square meters of inside space. We've got a wonderful community in our little Waterfall Wilds, 2 wonderful restaurants on each end.
And you've got the good ones running it, and they're smart operators.
Exactly. And when I'm really exhausted, I go to Thorny Bush.
You see, because...
To just rest.
Yeah, because gardening's been terrible for your lifestyle.
But you can burn yourself out trying
absolutely.
to make everything right, and sometimes you've got to take a break.
He's a perfectionist. He's Keith Kirsten. He's always been a perfectionist. He's gone off the radar for the last 12 years or so, but coming back with a bang with a franchise concept. You'll see the name of Keith Kirsten at Waterfall Estate in that area, and watch out. I think there's a growth
And our
business
Facebook,
here.
Keith Kirsten Waterfall.
Keith Kirsten Waterfall on Facebook.
On Facebook.
You're so 21st century.
Absolutely.